Yes.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third session this morning. We are really blessed to be able to have a really good presentation. We have invited Lieutenant Colonel Wiedmeyer and Master Sergeant Hilton from Utah Army National Guard. They participated, we actually participated in an exercise that they sponsored at Camp Williams a few weeks ago. It was amazing. The opportunity to be able to work together and interrelate together is golden. And it's something that we want to pursue in the future. We'll do a lot more of. So with little ado, let me introduce Master Sergeant Hilton. He'll be beginning, and then Lieutenant Colonel Wiedmeyer will be following him up. So let's get to the next one. Welcome, you guys.
Okay, this is a little bit awkward for me. I've never really had to talk with a microphone, so I'll do my best and not like a weirdo up here holding this thing. But Master Sergeant Hilton with Utah Army National Guard, this is really exciting for me because I've gone 20 years in the Utah Guard with never having any interaction with our CAT brothers and sisters. We were just talking about it. We've seen in passing every now and then with you either at Camp Williams using some of the facilities out there, or in Draper, I've seen just a couple flyers up on the wall saying CAP. It's weird, I don't know who they are. But now I kind of know who you are, and it's exciting to see where this can go, especially after having seen where we were in the comments that we had just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it started.
I'll mute them.
If you have questions, feel free to just let me know. But this can lead to a lot of great things, especially for the state of Utah. Because as you see up here, what we want is a partnership of service for the state of Utah. Because this is where we live, this is where we work, and this is where we can have the most impact. Next slide, please. Okay, so when I first joined, I had crusty E7, who grew up to be an even crustier E9, who has now retired and has become a crusty civilian director of emergency operations. But a day didn't go by that you didn't hear this phrase come out of his mouth at least once, and it's called cradle to grave. Anyone think they know what cradle to grave means? Okay, well I do, because I heard it every single day. But cradle to grave is everything has a process. And if you don't follow that process from the very inception until the very completion of it, that process is going to fail. And so, because this is new for us, our partnership, and not just our partnership, but the assignments and the missions that we're called out on, all follow a process. And part of that process includes these three keys. Different roles, same goals. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing when we're called up to respond to an event, right? Because we don't know what the event is going to be. But we go about it in different ways. The way we go about it is by using the knowledge that we have, the knowledge of the systems, the knowledge of the teams that we work with, the knowledge of each other. And then once we have all of this, we go into training as we respond. It's a little bit tailored because I've never had to say that, it's train as we fight, but I don't think they like to use the word fight in domestic operations. I had to take that out. Okay, next slide, please. All right, different roles, same goals. Next. Okay, so when we're called up on an event, what are we trying to do? What is the overarching theme that we are trying to accomplish?
Save lives.
Save lives? Mitigate emergencies? Okay, so when I am called upon an emergency, what I feel I'm trying to do, in collective with everybody else out there, is provide current, accurate information to my decision makers. Because I'm not the decision maker. I'm not the governor or the tag or anyone who's going to be deciding who, where, what, when, why something's going to happen. The most I can do is to give him the best information possible so that they can make that decision. How do we do that? Can I do that by myself? If someone is lost in a search and rescue mission is called up, can the Utah National Guard J2, which I represent, do that all by themselves?
No, as a team, we put together the best information we can and provide that to whoever needs it.
Exactly. It takes a team effort. Kat has a totally different role than I do as the J2, G2, but without one another, we can't provide the best information all the way up to our decision makers and our leaders. What can we do better though? All of it, right? The second we stop trying to get better is the second that we fail. So, whether it's communications, which through our last comments, we understood that even though we thought we had a plan, it didn't really work out the best, and trying to figure out a new way to do it. We can understand each other's roles better, because if we understand each other's roles better, I'll do that on my next slide, the mission will be more effective. If you go back real quick. I just want to point out some of the graphics that are on here. So in discussing how we can do things better and working together as a team, this is our sync matrix or our flow chart for how information is put through. And you'll see we have all these different lines of collection efforts through NGB using satellite or requesting satellite imagery, to National Guard Dakotas, to CAB Cessnas flying around. And all of that is pushed through and finally makes it to the end user. So anytime you go out on a mission, well, some of you, I'm sure you'll see this. You'll see how, for the operation, different collection efforts and communications are going to flow through, so you understand how it's going to work. Okay, next slide, please. Knowledge is power. Does anyone know what this snapshot is in the bottom corner?
It's the DART system.
Right, DART. Is DART pretty new? Yeah, it's new to a lot of us.
Yeah.
We've just started using it within the last year for the DART. Is this something that's going to help us create knowledge?
100%.
And something that's going to help us put out knowledge, share knowledge? Okay, next. So knowledge in all of this is key. I know what I can do, but do you guys understand what I can do and what my capabilities are? You guys are experts once you're up in the air, and I don't know really what you're capable of producing yet because we haven't worked together. We haven't shared our abilities. Next. So who's the best to learn that from?
Each other.
Each other, right? Now, this is great to be up here in a little presentation platform or forum, but that doesn't really help us garner knowledge or pull that knowledge from each other. You're just kind of soaking in whatever I present. So, this comments that we had was our perfect beginning to creating our knowledge base, which leads to increased efficiency. So as we practice and as we go through these exercises together, I'm better able to understand that once your aircraft is in the air, what kind of pictures and what kind of media you're going to be able to produce for us to use. And vice versa, through DART and through briefings, you're going to see what kind of products we put together for our leaders to know what they're looking at. Because if you're in the air and you know what kind of products we're going to be putting together, during your loading time, you're going to be able to find the better pictures. You're going to be able to find the better viewpoints. So that instead of sending down 1,000 pictures that we have to sift through and find, a couple that will actually work, you know better what is going to be presented to our decision makers and spend your time finding those shots. And vice versa. If we know what you're capable of, we're going to know what better we can ask you for, right? So train as you respond. This image is from our comments, and I'll just point out a couple things. It's very busy. Lots of knowledge and information is being shared. So here we have our UPAT, our unclassified processing and assessment. So they're putting together these graphics so that we can present information. And at the same time, we have two different live stream videos going on. The one up on the main screen is from CAP, and the one down here on the television is from the DPS helicopter that was flying around. And because this was our first time, we didn't really know how it was going to work. We didn't know what was going to be the best way to stream these things. We didn't know really how this was going to come together. And in the end, it worked pretty good. Next, please. So we had to put in the time. A lot of us, well, a lot of you are volunteer basis. Myself, Colonel Meyer, this is our full-time job. But does it mean any less or any more? Anyone else in the room just because of our status? No. So in order to get proficient, you have to put in the time. Colonel Meyer is a very busy guy and has lots of other things going on. So in order for him to be able to get these COMEXs put together, it takes time from him. You guys as being cadets and volunteers, it takes time out of your lives too. But if we want to get better, if we want to be proficient, we have to put it in. When we do this together, we can identify our weaknesses, our shortfalls, our trouble areas, because we can sit down and talk about it on paper all we want, and we can, game plan it of what we think is going to happen. But until we actually put it into practice, we don't know what's really going to come from it. Because maybe our plan is awesome, but the way we do things don't sync up with CAP in the way that you guys work. For example, our communication methods that we have to come up with a patchwork for that. And then finally, after we find out, some of our shortfalls, we refine the process. And does it stop there? No, it starts all over again. So it's the OODA loop, right? You guys know OODA loop? No? Okay, talk to some of your mentors about OODA loop. But the OODA loop starts all over. And it will continue to go because we will continue to find ways that we can improve. And we will continue to find the things that work and make them even better. So the last slide, I'll just go through a bunch of different example products that came from our UPAD during the COMEX. So this is just a little debris collection graphic because it was a search and rescue effort for our COMEX with the CAP, but for our processing team, we get them a separate scenario that is flooding was occurring and that we needed to know information on flooding in the area. And so this is what we were able to take using CAP footage and some of our own footage. Came up with a debris collection graphic to know where some of the trouble sites are, where water flow. Next. Population density. If it's flooding, you want to know where the people are. Next. If we know where people are and we need to get them out, we have to know how we can extract them. Through water, air, ground. So here's little helicopter landing zone assessments. Go ahead. Breadth of affected area. So we have an idea of how much damage we're looking at so far. Next. This is just a quick situational graphic to show overall what's flooding, what some of the routes look like, what some of the images on the ground looks like. Next. The damage, what has happened so far. Next. And then finally, route assessment. So if we're going to try and get into the area, our analysis team, we put it all together to let us know what's going to be the best methods. So in closing, at least for my portion, this is really exciting. I appreciate what Colonel Meyer is trying to do in helping establish a relationship between CAP and Utah National Guard, because our roles, they really aren't much different. We're here to try and respond for our state when needed. And with that, any questions? Yes.
Yeah, Sergeant, I really appreciate how you led off your presentation. You said, do I really know how you operate? And do you really know how I operate? We're a service organization and we can provide products, but we don't decide what you need. We learn from you what you need and then we try to get it for you. And for us to be able to properly serve you, we've got to understand how you operate. And we need to help you understand how we operate so that it's really seamless. So this is the challenge for all of us going forward. when we get an opportunity to work with the Army National Guard, we're learning about how things are done. There's not one way. We have to be multilingual, we have to be multifaceted, and be able to get into any environment and be able to operate. So the more that we can learn and understand from Master Sergeant Hilton and from Colonel Wiedmeyer is going to help us be able to serve them better, and that's what we're all about. So thanks for doing that.
I agree completely with what you said. So my career, I've spent 20 years in military intelligence. So I'm both counterintelligence and civil intelligence. I've gone to Iraq and Afghanistan doing intelligence missions. And even during this full operation, this COMEX that we had, there were still things that I was learning and still things that we knew were going to come up that I hadn't had a face or answer yet. And it still challenged me to be able to come up with ways to make this exercise happen, to make sure that we were able to get it done. So knowledge never stops, learning never stops. And the more we can bring together in this classroom and through anyone watching and in room 2, and the guard, the better our response is going to be, which really matters because if we're responding, usually lives and property are on the line. And we want to make sure there's as little damage as possible. And yes.
So in the exercise, what, were you looking for the CAP to provide like a bigger picture of the area? Or what was it?
Yeah, so for CAP, their mission was, so I was flying with the DPS aircraft, so I didn't get to hear all the communications between the Emergency Operations Center and CAP as far as taskings. I don't imagine they vary much from ours, but for the DPS, we were called to do, grid pattern searches for a missing hiker, and they would call in different key points that they wanted to have searched, and so we would move on to that point and see what we could find. CAP, that was their mission, was to live stream image of the specific target areas that they felt an individual could be found. So depending on whatever response you get called to, depends on where they're going to ask. If it's an earthquake, you're probably not just going to be going back and forth on search and rescue. You're going to be focusing in on specific infrastructure, bridges, power plants, whatever, to provide as much and as detailed information as possible. Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Luke get you sick on that DPS ride?
After you fly around in Afghanistan and some Black Hawks for a year.
Still has a king.
Yeah, I felt like I was in a Cadillac. I kind of fell asleep at one point, and he had
I've
to
heard,
give a quick little nudge to remind me that we were on duty, so.
I heard Luke likes to fly backwards, actually.
No.
So, okay.
Luke is like an Uber driver.
He's
He
great,
is-
yeah.
He's really nice. Anything else? Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, so my name is Lieutenant Colonel Eric Wiedmeyer. Remind me in the process to come back to how the whole process works of requesting Utah National Guard and CAP assets, and how that works with the state down to us. Because we as the Utah Guard do not task or ask CAP to not fly unless we're doing an exercise. So here, so I spent 33 years, I probably shouldn't say that out loud, because now I feel really old. Spent 33 years in the Utah National Guard, Army National Guard. Here's my tie to the Air Force. So the gentleman on the bottom left in the photo is my grandfather, Don Simmons. December 7th, 1941, he was still in high school. It was the summer of his senior year. And he went over to Hawaii to spend some time with his brother who worked for Coca-Cola. He got a job with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola provided a lot of vending machines on Pearl Harbor at the military installations. So December 7th, 1941, my grandfather wakes up to some loud noise. And my uncle's house, or his brother's house, my uncle's house, was on the hills above Pearl Harbor. And they had a perfect view on most days, looking out over a peaceful, calm Pearl Harbor. But on December 7th, he woke up to loud noise, And they walked out and on the front yard, you can see Japanese Zeros bombing the harbor. So he spent the rest of the day, like most of the citizens in Hawaii, in a panic trying to figure out what to do and where this was going to go. The next day, as part of an employee of Coca-Cola, they had to go down and inventory all the Coca-Cola products and machines on Pearl Harbor. He said as a 17-year-old kid, still first out of high school, that's quite the eye-opener. And soon after that, he came back home to the States, to California, and joined the Army Air Force and became a pilot and learned how to fly. So this picture was taken in Arizona in 1944. That's my tie to the Air Force back before it was even the Air Force as the Army Air Force. Next slide. So how this relationship kind of, the inception of how we wanted this to happen and why it got started was summer of 2020. I'm down on vacation down by Delta, Utah, and all of a sudden I get a call saying, we need you to get back up to Salt Lake. We have some incidents going on in downtown Salt Lake. So I pack my family up, our friends up, and we leave Delta, Utah, and come back up to Salt Lake, and to find civil unrest in downtown Salt Lake, which we never thought we'd have happen. The top picture is actually in DC, the crowds in DC, but Salt Lake City and then our state capitol for the bottom two pictures. So at some point, so I get called up, I'm up at the State Emergency Operations Center at the state capitol as the liaison from the Utah Guard up to the capitol. And anytime the CEOC, the State Emergency Operations Center, or the governor asked for assets, he would bring it down to us in the Emergency Operations Center, and then I'd send it down to the Adjutant General to try to get assets to come support. At one point, the law enforcement down in Salt Lake was having a hard time following the crowds in downtown Salt Lake. So we have a proper use agreement, memorandum, that we have to get in order to fly Utah Guard assets over civilian populations in order to not gather intel. So we have to get an agreement in order to do it. We cannot, as military entities, gather intel on U.S. citizens. And so it took a long time to try to go through and ensure that we had the proper memorandums in place to fly our Lakota helicopter, our intel gathering helicopter, and to get it up into the air and then to get it flying, and then only do certain things. You can't take live stream, but you can't take captured photos for it. You can't do live video of it because then it can be used for intelligence gatherings. And so while we're downtown, we did get the use agreement up and running, got it working, but we didn't have a way to broadcast the live stream from the helicopter down into the Emergency Operations Center. So we had one Guard member on the helicopter, we had one UHP member on the helicopter, and they were both texting what they were seeing back down the Emergency Operations Center, trying to figure out crowds moving down 3rd North or crowds moving up 3rd East. We couldn't really see it though, but they were texting back and forth, using their thumbs up, trying to let us know where crowds are moving, what it looked like they're going to go, if they were split off, going what direction, where it was going to happen. We find out Lakota into the air, but we had a handheld display screen that line of sight only could be transmitted a video down to a small, I think it's about 8x10 video screen. So I had one of my employees stand up on the veranda at the state capitol, line of sight to the helicopter, with a long cord going down to the Emergency Operations Center onto the video screen down in the Emergency Operations Center. Then every once in a while I have to call them, hey, turn left or turn right. We're losing the signal. It's not coming through clear anymore. Move to your left, move to your right. Can't see it anymore, it's gone. Trying to direct him where we can get a better video of what's happening around the Capitol, around Utah, and downtown Salt Lake. We figured there had to be a better way to figure out how to get a common operating picture into the Emergency Operations Center without having one employee standing out as an antenna directing where the video went to and where it came back from. DART has been around actually for about 10 years. But it has not been very effective or hasn't been bolstered up. Utah, the National Guard pays for it yearly, has a contract to use it. And in 2020, we decided that we're, as Utah National Guard, going to use the DART system as our common operating picture back to our operations center. And we talked to the state, they decided they would join with us in using WebEOC and DART as part of their common picture to understand what is happening in a domestic operation. And so we started using and finding out what DART could do, how it could work, and how it could better our understanding of whether it be a civil unrest downtown Salt Lake, a search and rescue of somebody in the backwoods of the Uintas, or a fire, which we just had yesterday, our first fire of the year down in Iron County. How do we get a better picture of that and then be able to get that transmitted back to the decision makers, like Master Sergeant was talking about, so they can have a better understanding of where they are going to be able to save lives by making the decision the right way. So that's where this all came from, is trying to get our assets incorporated with other assets around the state. And so I sat down with Colonel Winter, who is the J2 or the G2 for the Utah National Guard, the intelligence officer for the state, and started looking at different assets. So we know we have Utah National Guard assets, the Lakota or the Blackhawk. We knew we had the Department of Public Safety with their assets. We knew that sometimes University of Utah helicopter would get called out on a search and rescue as well. They don't really have great visibility assets that they can go pick up. And then we started looking at, well, what does CAP do? What does CAP, the Civil Air Patrol, have that they can bring to the joint domestic fight to support Utah citizens in whatever it is that we have going on? And so Colonel Winter reached out and made contact with Civil Air Patrol, and our relationship started to grow from there into the exercise that we conducted a couple weekends ago. So we conducted a joint communications exercise. You see the task and purpose on the screen there. We wanted to actually get the Army Lakota helicopter up in the air, the DPS helicopter up in the air, and Civil Air Patrol fixed wing platform in the air as well at the same time. Due to unfortunate circumstances on our end, we were not able to fly our aviation assets, but we were able to get the other two assets up into the air and conduct a area search. And the idea behind that whole thing is really to get all the way from the ground searcher on the ground, the search and rescue team on the ground that was looking for a lost hiker, to be able to communicate back to an incident command post, which is the county emergency search and rescue team, back to the state emergency operations center, and then in effect the Guard, Utah Guard, and Civil Air Patrol operations centers. I always communicate from ground level to platforms in the air, and then get a picture of the ground back up to the emergency operations center where we're doing this. We work around, we change our vocabulary from military vocabulary when we're working with the civilian population to start talking in FEMA lifelines. And these are the lifelines that we look at across the board when it comes to an emergency in the state. And we call this one, group this one underneath the communications. And then we look at what capabilities the Guard has that can fit and support and help communications. And so we ask our staff on the far left what components we have, and then they come back with our gaps of capabilities, what we don't have the ability to do or can do. Next one. And then a busy slide, right? So this is our video communications line from the ground and air all the way back to the command post. How we communicate all the way back. In each one of those scenarios. If you look at it, so the searcher on the ground has one type of a radio. The aircraft, each one of those have possibly another type of a radio, back to a radio or video back into the command post. And because we all come from different services, Air Force uses their contracts to get their communications assets up and running. The Army uses their communications contracts to get ours up. And typically, we don't communicate. There's no way in between to help us to transmit to each other sometimes. And so we have to figure out a way around that. And Master Sergeant Hilton helped us do that this last week. And then we had also our one of our other communication experts, Sergeant Parker, helped us out as well. So next slide. So this is how we throw Dart into it. Dart's all based off of cell phone towers and using cell towers. And our next event that we're going to do, we're going to try to get into backcountry where cell coverage is not as great, but be able to use our assets to boost cell coverage in order to get the cell coverage to work with Dart and get that to transmit. So next slide. Kind of looked at the slide already earlier, different assets, and then kind of some of the technical pieces for radios and radio frequencies. Next slide. Next slide. So Camp Williams, looking at where we were going to set up our talk at, and then set up where we wanted to set up we did a joint operations center. We had not only the Guard, we had the State Emergency Operations Center Director for Operations, which was Sheila Curtis. We had the Incident Commander from Utah County and their search and rescue team. And we had them all. We had us all, in order to keep it simple to where we didn't have to work through other communications issues, we did a joint talk all together so we can just talk across the room, try and figure it out and make sure we're able to troubleshoot any situations or instances. And then there was the search area. So we have on Camp Williams, the west side of Camp Williams was restricted airspace. We had live fire, smaller fires going on downrange. And then we kept the east side of Camp Williams open to the grid search. We really wanted to run it like a search and rescue would ran by an incident commander from the county level. So we left it up to them on how they wanted to do it, whether it would be a grid search or to direct traffic, direct each individual asset onto a certain spot or location. And we let them kind of decide that as they went through. Next slide. Next slide. All right, so we did the event this last April. We're looking at wanting to do another event in August. So if you see the timeline here, we'll do a initial planning conference towards the end of April, mid planning conference in May, and then final planning conference in June. Do some rehearsals again with Civil Air Patrol, the Utah Guard, Lakota, and DPS again in July, and then conduct an exercise 4th through 6th of August. And really we'll probably conduct a joint talk again out at Camp Williams, and then really invite anybody who wants to come out to watch and look at it to see what's happening. We want to expand the search area out to 2 different searches this time though, so that we're looking at not only a location on Camp Williams, but we're looking at another location maybe up in Heber, or actually down in out in Taylor County. And then we'll boost also service so we get communication back and forth. But we'll have 2 to 3 air platforms up with 2 separate locations to search, and then sending information back to our command post. Okay. Next slide. So really, how it all really works on getting us out onto, getting you or the Utah Guard out onto a site is that the Emergency Operations Center at the state capitol has an emergency, whether it be a fire, a search and rescue, or whatever it might be. And then they call one of us to come help them do the search and rescue, or to look at a fire, to get area coverage of a fire, to do their mapping. And so Sheila from the Emergency Operations Center calls us, and she can call both at the same time. And I don't know who the point of contact would be from the Survival Patrol. If there's a event that's set up even,
Yeah.
who is it that they call?
Sheila Curtis.
Okay. So we would get the phone call saying, hey, we need some air support from Civil Air Patrol and the Utah Guard. Can you come help? And then we get out on site, and the incident commander takes over our assets. We don't have any control once they get on site. We work for that incident commander. They're responsible for keeping the safety of the site at their topmost priority in order to keep space and distance from our air platform, so there's no mid-air collision. And so they work for them head on, and then they report down to incident commander. Incident commander then reports back up to the state, and then we get that information into our operations centers as well. And they also call it whatever other assets that they might need, but we're the two primary assets out on the air. Then we arrive, and I always worried about how do we do this if we've never done it before? Okay? So that's why we started to do these, is work out how do our helicopters talk to the Civil Air Patrol fixed wing platforms. How do they mid-air? How are they talking to each other? How are they talking down to the search and rescuers on the ground, and how are they then responding back to the incident commander? And we always talk great concepts at big levels, but we never get out on the ground and actually do it. So that's what these are meant to do, is to get us out on the ground, work through the issues and troubleshoot the issues prior to us getting onto a really event like civil disturbances in 2020, and not know how we're gonna actually get video streamed back into the Emergency Operations Center, so the governor or the Commissioner Anderson can see what's going on, so they can help direct law enforcement into their live spot. Kind of where the concept came from, I think, so August this year, we want to do another event, a little bigger than we did in April. And then 2023 and 2024 in April, we're looking at doing bigger events where we're going to invite into Camp Williams the county search and rescue teams from around all the state. We're going to invite in the emergency managers from the counties, the State Emergency Operations Center, and then the Utah Guard, Civil Patrol. We'll invite all of us in, and we'll conduct training back and forth for a couple days, just normal training for search and rescue, normal training for fires. So military personnel will train, civilians will train the military. And then at the last day, we'll do a big event where we have a civil disturbance at the front gate of Camp Williams. We'll have a lost hiker on Camp Williams. We'll have a fire in Harriman, possibly, right? So we'll have different events set up that we'll respond to and support the training that we just did with everybody and all those different teams. So that will be April 2023, as long as we get to that inches, right? So then 2024, we'll do the same thing again. We'll invite everybody out to Camp Williams and do the same thing again. So, questions?
And this might be more of a question for Pops, but so in Civil Air Patrol, we also have ground teams for search and rescue. So are there any plans to have Civil Air Patrol ground teams involved with search and rescue operations as well?
So I definitely want to incorporate whatever assets, and that's what a capabilities brief from you all to us, so we see what assets, because even on the Air Guard side in the Utah Guard, they have search teams, we have search teams, so we need to see what we bring into the situation. And definitely, if it benefits you and your training and of your teams, we definitely want to try to bring that in.
Perfect.
There are some other kind of advanced remote imaging capabilities that you can put on the Civil Air Patrol aircraft. Besides STAR, STAR has support.
Yep.
There are a number of different platforms. One of the ones, I think it's something like Waldo, which is sequential spills and can stream back. Is that something that's a capability that would be of interest to Utah Guard?
Yes, I think that we definitely want to look at all the capabilities we have out there and find the best product. Dart, yes, does have some quirks in it, and they claim that they're going to get better over time. And really, where I want to go and where I'm working with their developers on is being able to transmit from their cell phone. So taking from the camera on the aircraft into their cell phone, and then cell phone transmits it back. Rather than having a laptop and a Wi-Fi puck all linked in, but have them build up their cell phone app to do that. But if there's other capabilities that you have, I definitely want us to look at what it is and what gets the best product that the J2 Intel personnel can bring in and put together to create a product to give to the governor, Commissioner Anderson, Adjutant General, to those decision makers. So definitely want to look at it.
In relation to that, one of the things that we've looked at is using on our ground teams, DART operators who are using their cell phones for that kind of data transmission back to DART. And so we're looking forward to the new version that they said is coming out that'll let that happen.
Yeah, so are we, because even on the cell phone app, you can take a picture or even a video on your cell phone and then transmit that back to it'd be great to do that, and everybody out there can get DART access and send up better pictures.
And then the other thing that we are interested in doing, and I talked with the DART developer, is we want to be able to do that same thing with drone video.
Yep. And that's something we have to rely more on you all for, because we can't use some of our assets.
Yeah, they don't like your drones
so
up there.
We rely on getting DPS up in the air or
Right.
you up in the air that we can use your assets in order to do an assessment on the ground of what's out there.
Right.
Because we can't use all of our assets that we have because of that Intel oversight stuff.
Mhm.
A lot of times, not the person calling. The more information we can get to our services before we come in on the air.
And that's one of the things we've noticed over the last few years too, is that the Guard is not supposed to be the first response force to any asset or any emergency within the state. We should be the last ones to be called in, but we have become easy over the last 2 years, and we've become very responsive to the state's needs, and the relationship between us and the state has come in where they're easy to call on us for support. But we should have time, like you said, to get things up and running before they get out there. Any other questions? All right, I appreciate everybody coming out and appreciate the time thinking.
Almost got a tragedy there, breaking the gift here, but Colonel, appreciate the brief on behalf of Utah Wing. Thank you again for the partnership. Sergeant Helton, you better get up here too. I got to get rid of this stuff. You like hot cocoa? You know, somebody else got one of these once, and he said, "I'm going to go to the hangar for another wing, and I'm going to drink my coffee right in front of the other guys with it." So walk around campus with that and take care of it. So, appreciate certainly the partnership, the work that we did, the volunteers that we had that participated in the exercise came back with great reports. So looking forward to those exercises going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.